So we're going to see how to insert values from a CSV file to SQLite. And we have the CSV file here as the grades.csv with all our values. This contains the list of students with the scores. That's the test 1, test 2, 3, and 4, and let me just open that table, and that's the columns here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, final and grade. So that's the table we created in the previous video, and so now I'm going to see how to insert these values into this SQLite table. So let me go back here, and we created a method called insert CSV to SQLite, and we connected as usual to the SQLite DB class, and this is the connect method. So we are having access to the database we created here. So we make connection and create our cursor, and now we're using the context manager to read values from the grades.csv file, and we're reading it as file. So we open that connection, and we set number of records to 0 because we want to count how many rows that would be read by the file within the file. So I was able to create a for loop. So created index and row variables using enumerate to read through the file. So for each row, we're going to take the index 2. So we're saying if the index is greater than 0, because we do not want to read the first line, since the first line is the columns for the data which we want to insert. So we've already created the columns, so we don't need that. So it's saying as long as index is greater than 0, so it's going to start counting from here down. So it's going to take the row and it's going to convert everything to lowercase, and it's going to replace all the spaces with no spacing, like these spacings we have here. So after that, we put it into a variable called row here, and then we're able to execute the SQL statement. Here it says insert into students table the first name, last name, serial number, and the test, final, and grade with the values. So I'm trying to avoid SQL injection. That's why I did it this way. And my value is the second item that I put within this statement. So it's taking the second argument, and it's just going to split for each of the rows that we take. It's going to split that, and which means it's going to convert it into a list with all our values, and with this way it's going to pass the contents of the list into this variables or these expressions here. So when we commit that, it's going to execute this. So it will insert for first name, it's going to take the first value here and it will insert that as the first name, and we're going to increment the number of records by 1, so that for each iteration it's going to increase that, and we will know how many rows have been inserted into our database. Then we would, as usual, take exception errors. So if there's any error, it's print out the error. Else, if all this is good, then it will print out the number of records and says records inserted successfully and return true. and then this will just close our connection and close the cursor. So that's just the method to insert from this CSV file and insert it directly into the SQLite data table of the database here. So I'm going to run that, and let me close this. Let me hide that actually. And now I'm going to say student dot, I'm calling the method instead CSV to SQLite. So I'm going to run that. And now it says 16 records inserted successfully. So let me check that. Let me check the records here that was inserted here. So I'm going to refresh, and now we can see our 16 records that was taken out from this CSV file, and it's been inserted into this our database. So let me run the test for that. So I'm going to open this up, and this was the test I created. Insert CSV to SQLite, test for inserting student records from CSV file, and it's going to take the same method for the class, student class. So to store that as result, and it will test it against whether it's an instance and of boolean, and whether it's true, and whether it's actually receives a value. So I'm going to run that, but first let me check. Okay, I'm currently in this working directory, so I'm going to say Python -m unit test, then tests folder, and inside there we have the test and underscore students .py. And now it says 16 records inserted, so it tested that, and it says run 2 tests because it also ran our previous test for creating the table. So that was successful, and that's why it gave the results okay. So that's simply how to insert values from CSV to SQLite.